Imagine you're a city planner. Someone walks into your office and says, "We need to build a civilization, but there's almost no water." You'd probably show them the door. Saudi Arabia didn't have that option. They just built the civilization anyway, and then they engineered the water to match. What followed is one of the most audacious infrastructure gambits in modern history. A bet so enormous, so technically complex, and so politically committed that governments from India to California are now studying it like a textbook. This is the story of how Saudi Arabia built the world's largest desalination system, what it took to pull it off, what it unlocked that nobody expected, and the honest question of whether any of this can actually travel. Let's start with the problem, because the problem is genuinely staggering. More than 90% of Saudi Arabia is desert, and there are no permanent rivers. None. Average annual rainfall is about 50 millimeters, compared to London's 600, and yet tens of millions of people live there. Cities have erupted from the sand, and the country hosts millions of pilgrims every year. So, where does the water come from? For a long time, the answer was underground. Saudi Arabia sits on ancient fossil aquifers, water that seeped into rock thousands of years ago and just sat there. The kingdom leaned on those reserves hard. Experts estimate 4/5 of that fossil water is now gone, one of the planet's greatest freshwater resources, all but emptied in a single generation. That is not a slow leak. That is a drain left open. By the 1970s, the math was brutal. A population booming with oil wealth, a country industrializing at warp speed, and an aquifer running dry. In 1974, the Saline Water Conversion Corporation, the SWCC, was established by royal decree. In the early stages, it adopted multi-stage flash distillation. Boil seawater, collect the steam, condense it back into fresh water, repeat across dozens of chambers. It works. It is also extraordinarily energy hungry. And Saudi Arabia, sitting on the world's largest oil reserves, had a very convenient answer to that problem. Here is where the blueprint gets interesting, and where most people miss the real story. Saudi Arabia did not just build a few desalination plants, they went all in, completely, nationally, strategically. By the end of 2025, daily desalination capacity exceeded 16 million cubic meters, a 247% increase compared to 2016, nearly 2.5 times more capacity in under a decade. That is not incremental improvement. That is a country treating water with the same urgency it treats national security, because that is exactly what it is. The flagship is the Ras Al Khair plant on the eastern coast, a $7.2 billion facility paired with a 2,400 megawatt power plant, making it the world's largest hybrid desalination plant. Then came Shoaiba, now listed by Guinness World Records as the largest desalination plant by capacity, nearly 3 million cubic meters per day. 3 million cubic meters every single day, enough to fill over 1,000 Olympic swimming pools daily from seawater. And here is something that blows most people's minds. Riyadh, in the heart of the country, is supplied with desalinated water pumped from the Persian Gulf over 467 kilometers. They are not just making water, they are pumping it nearly 500 kilometers inland, uphill, across desert, to a city of millions. The engineering is jaw-dropping. The political will to fund and sustain it is something else entirely. Here is a question worth pausing on. If you had to make this same call, would you bet your country's survival on a technology that barely existed at the scale you needed? powered by a fuel you were selling to the rest of the world? Yes or no? Let me know in the comments below. So what did going all in actually unlock beyond just water? First, the obvious one, urban expansion. Desalination sits behind Riyadh's growth, Eastern Province industry, pilgrimage infrastructure, Red Sea development, NEOM, mining supply chains, and industrial cities. Without the water guarantee, none of those sectors could scale. Desalination is not just infrastructure, it is the permission slip for everything else. Second, the innovation dividend. Saudi Arabia's Shuaibah Phase 5 plant set records for low energy consumption, 2.34 kilowatt hours per cubic meter. Early thermal plants consumed 13 to 15. Getting to 2.34 is the kind of breakthrough that makes the technology viable for the rest of the world. They built so much, so fast, that they accidentally became one of the world's leading laboratories for making desalination cheaper. Third, the technology transition. The SWCC shifted from multi-stage flash distillation to reverse osmosis, forcing seawater through ultrafine membranes under high pressure. Faster to build, cheaper to run, far more scalable. Saudi Arabia's volume of investment stress-tested reverse osmosis at a scale no other country had attempted, accelerating the cost curve downward for everyone. Fourth, the solar pivot. The Al-Khafji solar desalination plant is one of the earliest large-scale facilities designed to run primarily on solar photovoltaic power. The country with the most sunshine on Earth, sitting on the most oil on Earth, building solar-powered water plants. That is a hedge so elegant it almost looks like strategy. It is strategy. Of course, no blueprint this size comes without cracks. The energy bill is staggering. Electricity consumption for desalination tripled in Saudi Arabia between 2005 and 2020, reaching roughly 6% of the kingdom's total electricity consumption, about 17 terawatt hours in 2020. Equivalent to the annual output of a large nuclear power plant, most countries do not have the energy surplus to absorb that. Then there is the brine problem. For every liter of fresh water pulled from the sea, a concentrated salty byproduct goes back in. According to the UN Environment Program, unless properly treated and dispersed, it can form dense plumes that degrade coastal ecosystems, reduce dissolved oxygen, and create dead zones. Saudi Arabia has managed this better than most, but it is a real constraint that scales with capacity. And then there is demand. Water was priced at an estimated 5 to 10% of actual production cost. Water priced that cheaply is water people will waste, and Saudi Arabia has one of the highest individual freshwater consumption rates in the world. Building the supply without managing the demand is only half a blueprint. Recent reforms have begun reducing those subsidies, but the gap remains large. So, can this blueprint actually travel? Honestly, partially. India's desalination market is expected to grow from $740 million in 2025 to over $1.1 billion by 2031. Coastal states are investing fast, treating water security the way Saudi Arabia always has, as a national priority. Asia-Pacific now leads the global desalination market with 35% share, driven by large-scale projects across China, India, and Southeast Asia. And California, facing its own groundwater crisis, is watching all of it carefully because the American West's aquifer story rhymes uncomfortably with Saudi Arabia's from 50 years ago. Total global desalination capacity exceeded 115 million cubic meters per day in 2024, with nearly 21,000 plants operating worldwide. The world is not asking whether to desalinate anymore. It is asking how fast, how green, and how cheap. What Saudi Arabia proved, and this is the real lesson, is that the technology is not the bottleneck. The will is. The transformation did not happen because the engineering was easy. It happened because the decision was made, funded, and never reversed across decades. The Saudis did not wait for a perfect solution. They committed to an imperfect one and spent 50 years making it better. The uncomfortable truth for every government studying this model is that Saudi Arabia had two enormous advantages: essentially unlimited capital from oil revenues and a government structure that could make a 50-year infrastructure bet without an election cycle getting in the way. Most democracies cannot replicate either of those conditions cleanly. But here is what they can replicate: the mindset. Treat water as sovereign infrastructure, not a utility. Fund the research, build the scale, tolerate the early inefficiencies, and iterate aggressively. Because the alternative, waiting until the aquifer runs dry, is not really an alternative at all. Saudi Arabia learned that the hard way. The rest of the world does not have to. If this video made you think differently about where water actually comes from and what it takes to keep it flowing, drop a like and subscribe. We go deep on the infrastructure, engineering, and technology stories quietly reshaping the world. And if you want more on desalination, the science of membranes, the economics of brine, or the next generation of solar-powered plants, let us know. We are just getting started.